Hello there. Welcome to my review of the 1977 film Capricorn One. Written and directed by Peter Hyams and featuring an ensemble cast that includes Elliot Gould, James Brolin, Brenda Vaccaro, Sam Waterston, Hal Holbrook, Karen Black, Telly Savalas and O.J. Simpson. For me, this is the best of the post-Watergate conspiracy paranoia films of the 1970s, and there's strong competition from the likes of 3 Days of the Condor, The Parallax View, and of course All the President's Men, amongst others. I think the reason I prefer it is because it's removed enough from Watergate as a story, while also directly tapping into the paranoia of that era. It helps that Hyams wrote the film before Watergate, but wasn't able to get it made until after that scandal had broken. I think it's fair to say that pre-Watergate America was a fairly politically naive place, in the respect that even after the horrors of World War II, the McCarthy witch hunts, the assassination of JFK and the Vietnam War, there was a general consensus amongst a large percentage of the population that even if politicians did horrific things that you might fundamentally disagree with, and if they didn't always tell the truth, they would absolutely never do anything illegal to further their career. Of course, that all changed with Nixon's very public scandal, and virtually overnight the American public became hugely distrustful of politicians. And it's not that Hollywood capitalised on this incident. Conspiracy films were already an established genre. The Manchurian Candidate came out in 1962, for example. It's that there was a greater appetite for conspiracy films. If you haven't seen the film, the plot is that 3 astronauts are due to go on the first manned mission to Mars, but it turns out the mission will be faked and the astronauts are coerced to go along with it. When the rocket burns up on re-entry, they realise that they will have to be silenced permanently and so escape and go on the run. There's more to it than that, and that's what makes the film fascinating and brilliant, but I'll get to that when it comes to spoilers. What's really interesting about the conspiracy at the heart of the film is that it's not some grand scheme to control the world led by a shadowy cadre of evil moustache-twirling villains. From the start, it's a conspiracy of convenience by desperate people pushed too far. It all begins because NASA is in danger of losing funding, and this manned mission to Mars is their last hope of rejuvenating public interest in space that has declined so much since the moon landings. I should say there's no suggestion in the film that the moon landings were faked, despite this film taking clear inspiration from the idea of what if they had been. Hyams has stated that the plot came to him when he realised that the only proof that the moon landings happened for the majority of the world was via the TV footage, and that they accepted that. But what if that was a lie? While the film does explore how that might play out, it also takes some creative license to make it work. For example, there is a technician at Mission Control, Witter, played by Robert Walden, who spots that the TV transmission of the footage of the fake Mars landing appears to be coming from Earth. He's the only one who spots anything amiss, but there's no indication that any other technician is in on the conspiracy. It seems to be coordinated by the higher-ups, which in the real world would be impossible based on the sheer number of people that work on these missions and the different but overlapping jobs they do. For the purposes of the film, however, it works because it simplifies the narrative and sparks the unravelling of the conspiracy, even if it is unrealistic. The purpose of the film is not to be a documentary, though. It's a study on how people can be driven to do evil things for what they think is the common good, and how principles can be chiselled away or how they can remain firm. The main villain of the film is Hal Holbrook's Dr. James Calloway. Although he indicates that there are powers working above him, he is the main focus of the villainous activity and the face of the evil being done. Even so, he's not necessarily an evil person. His desire to meet his lifelong ambition, combined with the pressures of a successful mission, means that he makes the decision to fake the landing rather than cancel the whole mission. This is his initial, well-intentioned step on the path to hell. Having discovered that the life support system on the shuttles is defective, in a damning indictment of corporate interests,
the good people from Con Amalgamate delivered a life support system cheap enough so they could make a profit on the deal. Works out fine for everybody. Con Amalgamate makes money. We have our life support system. Everything's peachy. Except they made a little bit too much profit. We found out 2 months ago it won't work.
He decides to go ahead with the fakery, as this would lead to further investment into the space program, whereas a cancellation would likely lead to the scuttling of NASA. At this point, he is misguided, but easy to sympathise with, as he presents his case to the 3 astronauts who have been pulled from the shuttle moments before launch. However, it isn't long before he takes his next, more insidious step, as Witter is disappeared because of his discovery, right under the nose of Elliot Gould's reporter, Robert Caulfield. It's this murder of an innocent man, just trying to do a good job, that erodes what sympathy we might have had for Calloway, and it also serves the purpose of getting Caulfield invested in the story.
No, 3657, Mr. Elliot Witter. Out of order.
The final step on Calloway's road to complete unredemption comes when there's a problem with the return of the now unmanned shuttle as it burns up on re-entry. With the men supposedly removed from the capsule to keep them safe, alive and well on Earth. Now Calloway has to make the decision to have them disappeared to keep the lie going, despite being close friends with the mission commander, Charles Brubaker, played by Brolin.
Brew, how long have we known each other? 16 years. That's how long. 16 years.
Calloway's gone from faking a Mars mission to preserve NASA to murdering one of his best friends to preserve the lie, and as much as it might seem to anguish him to make the decisions, he makes them nonetheless. In a scene where he has to announce the deaths of the astronauts, he is clearly devastated that he's aware they are still alive but soon won't be.
I cannot adequately describe how we feel. These men were an integral part of a family.
Entirely because of the decisions he's made. It's a devastating collapse of a once honourable man. This downfall is telegraphed fairly early on, when he is the one who has to try and convince Brubaker and the other astronauts, Peter Willis, played by Waterston, and John Walker, played by Simpson, that they have to agree to faking the mission. He begins with a plea to their duty to NASA and to the morale of the people of America, but when this isn't doing the trick, he threatens that their families will be killed if they don't agree. Holbrook is perfectly cast in this role as the conflicted, complex, but ultimately morally wrong character. He'd played the reverse of this in All the President's Men, and would often play these morally complex characters. He still retains part of his moral compass as he makes decisions that he believes are necessary evils. On the other end of the spectrum is Brubaker, who, against his better judgment, agrees to do wrong, then immediately regrets it, and wrestles whether to expose the lie or not. What's interesting is that Kellaway allows him to have this internal debate and makes no plans to get rid of him until he's forced to do so. It's made pretty clear that eventually Brubaker's sense of right and wrong will lead him to coming clean, but Kellaway doesn't act on this. Perhaps thinking that after the mission is over, there will be no proof of Brubaker's claims, and so he can discredit him rather than have him disappeared. Spoilers from here on out, so don't say I didn't warn you. Where I think the film falls down is that Brubaker's fellow astronauts are given very little to do, other than nod and agree with Brubaker, even going so far as to almost admit that.
We went along with this because of you.
They aren't really fleshed out beyond the very superficial. So it is absolutely no surprise when they are both captured soon after they escape. This is a pitfall so many films fall into, where the character who has done most of the talking and has had most of the character development is clearly going to be the main focus, so let's get rid of the people they're with as soon as possible. It happens in Planet of the Apes, it happens in Alien 3, it happens in most horror films. Here, it's not to show us the threat to Brubaker, as that's already been established with the disappearance of Witter. It's just to get rid of them to slimline the story, or perhaps reflect that his stronger sense of morality made him the better candidate for survival. Either way, it's unsatisfactory. Had Willis and Walker been given more character, their deaths would have had more emotional impact and been far more tragic, and I don't think it would have taken much. Had one of them been more willing to take part in the conspiracy at first, understanding what was at stake, and the other been more seemingly resourceful and capable at escaping, it would have added that little bit more character that I felt was missing. As it is, it's clear Brubaker is the lead, not just by his actions, but also because we spend so much time with his wife, played by Vaccaro. We spend very little time with the partners of the other astronauts, so it's pretty much guaranteed what the story is building towards. What's odd about this is that other minor characters are given more character than Willis and Walker, with David Huddleston's congressman given a humorous irascibility towards the vice president in several scenes.
We've reserved 3 of the best seats for you and for General Enders, right next to the Vice President. Is he here yet? No, sir, he's due any moment.
Asshole probably thinks they'll delay the launch for him.
And Caulfield's colleague, Judy Drinkwater, played by Black, and his boss, played by David Doyle, given their own character moments.
I'm not cynical, it's just that your act could use a little polish.
Nice of you to join us here.
Listen, I think I got something.
You need a dermatologist?
While the best Waterston gets as Willis is that he's the funny one. It's Gould Caulfield that really ties the story together, acting as the connective tissue between the conspiracy and its reveal. As I mentioned, he's brought into the story when his friend Witter mysteriously vanishes. Before that, he's simply reporting on the launch. Had the villains found a different way to deal with what Witter found, Caulfield would never have been involved, and the way his involvement escalates as the story goes on is wonderfully subtle and believable, purely because of how inept the villains are of putting him off. Rather than simply empty Witter's apartment, they put in a fake resident and set it up so it looks like she's been there for ages, which just increases his desire to find out what's going on. When they mess with his car to try and kill him, in an underrated but absolutely thrilling runaway car sequence, shot largely from the car's point of view, it serves to confirm to him that what's going on is sinister and significant, as does the shot they take at him. Everything they do make him more suspicious and more determined, no longer as a reporter, but as a concerned friend. It's this drip feed of information and incident that means there is no one grand discovery he makes, but a series of little finds that feel very believable. It's this determination from Caulfield and his instinct for deception that results in the climactic rescue of Brubaker from the forces of evil, that is entirely consistent with the rest of the story, and it's a very satisfying ending. The second hour of this film is dedicated to Caulfield unravelling the mystery while the three astronauts have escaped and are on the run across the desert. Caulfield pursues a gut instinct and questions Brubaker's wife, which leads to further revelations as he discovers more and more about what's going on. The scenes between Gould and Vaccaro are brilliant, as he shows incredible sensitivity to her situation and she shows incredible strength in the face of such adversity. The astronaut story is the least interesting element in the second half, as Walker and then Willis are caught and presumably killed very quickly. We don't see them do anything other than get caught, while Brubaker manages to avoid the people chasing him, which includes a graphic sequence where he kills a rattlesnake and eats it to survive, which is consistent with similar true life survival stories, but is still pretty disgusting. And while it's shot in such a way that means the rattlesnake and Brolin were never actually in the same place, the dead rattlesnake he eats looks disgustingly real and was apparently stuffed with raw fish. Unfortunately, this is the highlight of the escape, as a similar scene follows with Brolin having a scorpion crawl across his face, but that's about it until he finds an abandoned gas station, just as the villains arrive and Caulfield turns up to save him. When we cut from their escape to Brubaker, Willis and Walker's memorial ceremony, with a speech from the President, who in this case wasn't in on the conspiracy, it culminates with Brubaker's arrival, ensuring the perfect, undeniable conclusion that is very satisfying. It's not a perfect film. There are some issues which I think I've highlighted, and certain shots are badly done, to be quite honest. A more experienced director would have avoided these shots, as the depth of focus is out, making certain things in the frame appear blurry when they really shouldn't be, and the final shot in slow motion just doesn't quite work, but they by no means ruin the film. All in all, this is an excellent thriller at its heart, with some complex characters and storytelling and great performances from the whole cast. There have been talks of remakes over the years, but I really don't think they would work, as the social climate is so much different now. Conspiracy theories have become a little too pervasive for this story to thrive, and while it would be less interesting, it feels like a bolder move would be to make a version where they did go to Mars, but were confronted by the conspiracy theory that they didn't upon their return. It works much better as a period piece about the 70s than any updated version might, so hopefully this remains the only version of this story to exist. Thank you. Goodbye.